Hi there, and welcome to No More Excuses, Getting Real with Ourselves and then doing something about it. This is Diana Soroka with Wild Hearts, and I'm happy to welcome you to this hour of presentation. So today we're going to talk about, well, let me tell you what we're not going to talk about. We're not going to talk about shame. This hour isn't about shame, not pressure, not pretending that you need to be someone else to be more productive. It's really about you, about getting real with yourself, getting honest with yourself and your patterns and those stories that you tell yourself. Today, we're going to talk about those little ways that we stall, that we overthink things, that we avoid, that we just, and the ways that we distract ourselves from all those things that we actually want and sometimes need. Here's my truth. Most of the time, what's in my way is me. And I'm not saying that in a judgmental way, but in a human way. You know, we all do this. We all make excuses. We sometimes tell ourselves half truths. We overcomplicate, and then we call that being an adult. So today we're going to break some of that. We're going to break it down, not with a bunch of hustle or pressure, but with our own honesty, our own truth, clarity, and maybe I'm hoping a few giggles. We're going to name those things that we do that quietly hold us back. We're going to talk about how fear hides in plain sight and possibly others can see it, but we can't. We're going to explore what it looks like to move forward, and not by pushing harder, but by getting a little bit more open and honest with ourselves. And if nothing else, I'm hoping that you're going to leave today with one clear, doable step that will work for you, something true for you, something honest, and you can feel it in your bones. You don't need to fix your whole life today. I don't think that that is possible. You just need to show up, and you have already done that. So welcome, let's get to it. All right, so what is an excuse, really? I can tell you this, it is not laziness. It's protection, it's fear, it's stories we've believed for so long, they sound like facts. An example, I have told myself for so many years that I didn't have the time to write. Of course, that wasn't true. Anything that you really want to do, you can find time for. You can make it a priority. I had time. I just didn't want to face what that might mean if I wrote and I really tried and it wasn't good enough. That was scary for me. So here's some common excuses that people make. You know, it's not the right time, just like me. I do that so often. Or I need a little more clarity. I need to, I need to wrap my head around this. I don't have the energy. Or I'm just being realistic. Oh my goodness, I've heard that so many times. So, what's one excuse you know that you use that sounds convincing, but it's also kind of stinks when you hear it or say it out loud? So, let's break this down, because fear isn't just one thing, it's this whole process. And understanding that process helps us see where we get stuck. First, fear often masquerades as protection. It shows up dressed like responsibility or caution. It says things to us like, let's wait until we're more prepared. Now is just not the right time. I'll do it once I'm in a better place mentally. Wow, this sounds helpful, but it's really just trying to keep us comfortable. And I do that. I do that, and But I will also mention that I'm getting so much more aware of when I'm doing that. So, the second point here is that we start building stories around our fears. We don't just feel afraid. I mean, if we felt afraid, we get it right away. We build subconsciously, we build a belief system around it. So it becomes, I'm just not that kind of person. I'm not an artist. I'm not as good as she is. I don't write as good as she is. I never follow through. Other people can do that so much better than me. That's not me. So whatever story we have, it solidifies that fear. And we subconsciously stop questioning it. And then the third point here is that when we start using excuses, it's not because we're lazy, I mentioned that, but because we're trying to make that fear feel logical. So those excuses often sound like I'm too busy. I don't have the time. This is not that important. Back to that, I'm being realistic, or no one would be interested anyway. And these excuses are not random. They're evidence of this story that we've been telling ourselves often for years. And then fourth, we think we're the only one feeling this way. So we keep it to ourselves. We hide it from everyone else. But fear thrives in isolation. So when we start talking about it, when we name it out loud, that's when things start to shift. That's when we realize, oh, it's not just me. Everyone's carrying a version of this. This fear is normal, but it doesn't have to run the show. So this whole discussion here is a map of how fear operates. We start with protection. We go to our story. We make and design the excuse. And then we keep it within. We keep it silent. And when we reverse the process by speaking it out loud, we start to get our power back. And that is magic. Let's talk about rationalizations, not as flaws, but as protection strategies. Just know this, we rarely avoid things for no reason. We rationalize things to stay safe, to stay comfortable, to stay within the boundaries of what we know. So rationalizations as a safety. Let's talk about that. When we say things like, it's not the right season for that, or I don't want to make the wrong decision, so I'm going to wait, or I'm focused on other people's needs right now. I've got a lot going on. This really isn't a priority for me anymore, or right now. I need to figure out the right way to do this before I start. That wouldn't be fair to my partner, to my kids, to my team, whatever it is right now. Or I've tried something like that before and it didn't work. Or I'm just the kind of person who needs a plan before acting. And I've said this one myself. If I can't give it 100%, I shouldn't bother at all. So these don't sound like fear. They sound thoughtful. They sound grounded, considerate, logical, And that's what makes them so convincing. But often they're not based on clarity, they're based on avoidance. They're avoidance in disguise. They protect us from discomfort, not danger. Oh my gosh, that's so interesting to me. All right, two, the role of comfort zones. So what happens then? We stay in these comfort zones. If we don't move forward, if we listen to our excuses, we stay in our comfort zones because they're predictable. They're familiar. They don't challenge the part of us that's scared to death to stretch. So even when the comfort zone isn't good, it's known. And the brain will choose known over unknown 9 times out of 10. So the longer we rationalize, the smaller the zone gets. And we start calling it alignment or realism when it's really just self-protection. Oh my gosh, this stuff just excites me because I see it in myself. And number three, identifying personal contracts. So underneath all of this, there are these quiet rules we live by without even realizing it. You know, I always show up. I never ask for help. If I slow down, I'll fall behind. You know, I need to prove I can handle it. I can do this. Done that a few times. These contracts that we have with ourselves often come from childhood past experiences or early praise. But if we don't pause and question them, they run the show. And we have to, that's not a one-time deal in life. That's an ongoing process. So these are what rationalization is trying to protect. And that's number four, breaking the cycle of comfort. So how do we start to break that cycle? And it's not with force, friends, but with truth, with honesty. And sometimes that's so hard. So just start by noticing. Just notice when you're explaining something to yourself. Ask yourself, is this actually true? Or is this just familiar and safe? So then pause, take a small action that feels maybe just a little more honest to you, even if it's just saying, I'm scared to move forward, but I want to. That breaks the cycle. Not perfectly, but powerfully. You don't have to throw away all your safety nets at once. Just stop mistaking protection for progress. Ask yourself, what is this rationalization here really protecting me from? And that answer might change everything for you. Let's talk a little more about the inner stories, the ones that live on repeat in your head, that quietly shaping how you show up in your life. These stories aren't dramatic. Again, they're familiar. They're subtle. You trust them. They're often unconscious. And they tend to sound like facts from a trusted source. So those are things again. And these are ongoing scripts we hear in our head, often the same ones over and over again. I've never been good with follow through. I'm just not built for that kind of work. I don't do confrontation well. I always get overwhelmed. I'm just wired that way. If I slow down, I'm going to lose my momentum. This is the way I've always been. And you know, we don't question them because they've become normalized in our lives. But most of these stories weren't written by your most grounded, courageous, self-connecting, confident self. They were built through repetition, through conditioning, disappointment, and protection. So here's the shift for you. Just because a story has been with you a long time doesn't mean it deserves to guide your decisions now. You might not even remember when the story started, but you're still carrying it around. And if you don't name it, if you don't become aware of it, name it, it becomes the script for your future, for the rest of your life. So here's a possible solution to try. Just grab one sentence when you catch yourself saying something about yourself regularly, just one, something limiting, and then ask yourself, is this story true, or is it just familiar and comfortable? And even better than that, try flipping it. I'm not good with change. If you hear yourself saying something like that, then possibly change it to, change feels hard for me, but I'm learning to move with it. Here's another one. I never finish what I start. So you might change that to, I'm working on trusting my instincts about when to continue and when to let go. Oh, sounds so much better. Here's another one that I happen to know plenty of people who say this. I'm always late. Change that to, I'm learning to show up for my own time the way I show up for others. Oh, that's a good one, right? It doesn't have to be a total rewrite, just a reframe that leaves a little room for possibility instead of permanence. So remember, you are not your past behavior. You are not your old labels. You are not your self-protective storylines. You are the person who gets to write the next chapter. Oh, that's so exciting. So let's stop reading the old stories we're telling ourselves on a loop. Let's stop that. The truth is that most of us don't even realize we're making excuses. They're baked into our language. They sound like logic to us. They feel responsible. So take a look at this chart. These aren't hypothetical. These are the most common reported excuses people use when they feel stuck, when they feel scared, overwhelmed, or uncertain. And let's just pause on the top one. I don't have time, because that is the number one gold medal excuse. It's also one of the most socially acceptable ways to say, I don't know how to prioritize this without feeling guilty, or I'm afraid to start and not finish. Then there's I'm too tired, which may be real fatigue or emotional avoidance. I'm overwhelmed, which can be become really a permanent identity if we're not careful about it. I've already tried that, which sounds like experience, but often hides discouragement or fear of repeating disappointment. This table isn't here to call you out. It's here to show you you're not alone. These are universal, and if we can name them, we can shift them. Use this table as a mirror for yourself. As you look at the graphic, ask yourself, which of these excuses do I reach for most often? So what's underneath it when I say it? Because behind every excuse is either a fear that needs compassion, a boundary that needs reinforcing, or a story that needs to be rewritten. This isn't about pushing through. It's about noticing that pattern and asking, is this true or just familiar? That's how excuses start to loosen and truth starts to land with you. This is true self-awareness. Let's sit with this one for a minute. Facing our fears together. Because fear on its own is manageable. But when it's unspoken, it becomes absolutely paralyzing. And most of us have been trained to manage fear privately. We internalize it, we rationalize it, bury it under busyness or competence. And then what happens? It grows. Oh my goodness. It grows quietly, feeding on our silence and isolation. Fear thrives in the dark, and it gains so much power when it goes unacknowledged. When you feel like you're the only one struggling, the only one who hesitates, the only one who's still circling the decision months later, and that's simply not true. Everyone you admire, everyone who looks like they've got it all together, they have fear too. And the difference is some of them talk about it. And that truly does make all the difference. So how do we face fear together? How do we do that? Not by pretending it doesn't exist, not by crushing it or powering through, but by naming it gently, out loud. You don't need a spotlight. You don't need to dump it all in front of a crowd. You just need to stop hiding it from yourself and share it with one person or a few people who can hold it with compassion instead of critique. And this sounds like I'm scared that this won't work. I'm afraid I'm going to start and not finish again. If I really go for this, I don't know who I'll be when I get to the other side. That kind of truth is really sacred and surprisingly common. When we put fear into words, it shrinks. When someone nods and says, "Me too," it softens. And when we face it in community, even just with one safe person, it starts to lose control over our choices. This week, instead of hiding your fear or dressing it up as logic, try saying it simply. I'm afraid of, or you don't need to fix it or solve it. Just say it, then breathe. Let someone witness it without minimizing it. Even if you just say it to yourself in the mirror or journal it, you've already shifted something. We can't eliminate fear, but we can walk with it instead of letting it walk us. And the moment we stop doing it alone, that's when everything starts to change. Over hustle. Because if we're real, we've all been trained to hustle, to do more, be more, fix ourselves, check off more boxes. And sometimes personal development gets swept into that mindset where it becomes about constant doing instead of conscious being. But real growth is not about squeezing more into your already packed life. It's about asking yourself the hard, honest questions, like what's actually driving my behavior? Am I chasing something I don't even want? Who am I trying to impress? Honesty is the deeper work. It's admitting when you're burned out, but still trying to perform. When you're setting goals based on someone else's definition of success. Oh, that's a good one too. These are all so good. You're scared to slow down because you don't know who you are without that momentum. Hustle says push through it. Honesty says pause for a minute. What's real for me right now? So here's a solution to try. Take 10 minutes this week to not work on a goal. Instead, just sit with these 3 questions. What am I doing because I think I should? What's something I keep avoiding even though I know it matters? What would be or feel really honest to me instead of impressive? Being honest instead of impressive. That's the shift. Not from lazy to productive, but from performance to presence. When you lead with honesty, your growth becomes sustainable and actually aligned with who you are. Many of us have become surprisingly comfortable in chaos. We run from task to task, idea to idea, always managing, fixing, responding, and it feels so productive. It feels necessary. It even feels noble sometimes. But chaos can become a clever hiding place because when things are constantly moving and noisy, we don't have to sit with the real question: what's actually true for me right now? So, understanding excuses, the first step is recognizing that excuses often aren't laziness, they're protection. We keep talking about that. It's so important to understand that. How can you move on if you think you're being lazy? We use them to avoid the stillness where truth lies. And you know what your excuses are. We've been talking about it a lot. So these excuses aren't bad. They're just our brain trying to keep us safe from clarity, because clarity often demands action, that honesty or change. And two, the role of reflection. And this is where reflection becomes super essential. When we slow down, even just a little bit, we give ourselves the space to ask, is this truly aligned with who I am? That's a very important question. You're asking yourself, am I staying in this because it's comfortable, or is it because it's true? What do I know that I've been pretending not to know? Oh, good one. Reflection helps us separate what feels familiar from what's actually supportive, because the two aren't always the same. And number three, challenging comfort zones. Let's talk about comfort zones for a second. They're not inherently bad, not at all. But when they go unchallenged, they become cages for us. We stay there. We stay in routines, roles, and patterns that don't ask too much from us, but they also don't give much back. And over time, we start confusing comfort with that clarity. But clarity doesn't always feel good at first. It can feel disorienting, unsettling, even a little bit scary, because it often asks us to tell the truth and act on it. So the question becomes, am I choosing this because it's aligned or because it's easy? Good one. And number four, embracing change. And that is possibly the hardest part. Clarity doesn't mean that everything becomes smooth or simple. It just does not. It means that you know what matters and you're willing to let go of what doesn't. And that process is messy. It can feel like loss before it feels like freedom. But here's the gift. Once you stop outsourcing your clarity to chaos, you begin to feel peace again, not just relief. You start choosing based on truth, not tension. This week, create this little space for a real check-in, just 5 quiet minutes, and ask yourself, what truth have I been avoiding because it might require change for me? And then write it down. No fixing, no rushing, just a little honesty. Clarity doesn't always give you a full answer, but it will give you the next question worth asking. So remember, chaos feels urgent. Clarity feels uncomfortable until it doesn't. And eventually, clarity becomes the new comfort, but only when you stop mistaking constant motion for momentum. All right, take a deep breath, because this is a part where people often say, okay, but what do I actually do with all of this? And the answer is, you take a small, honest step, not a leap, not a life overhaul, just one small move towards something that feels more aligned and less performative. And here's why this matters. Most of us stall because we think that change has to be big to be meaningful. We believe if we can't commit 100%, it's not worth starting. I do that. If I don't have, and we sometimes think that if I don't have it all figured out, I shouldn't move. I shouldn't go forward. Or I need to do it right or not at all. But all that pressure we put on ourselves really keeps us stuck. What actually creates lasting change are these micro shifts, these tiny, consistent actions taken with a little honesty and intention. And here's what that might look like for yourself. Sending a message you've been avoiding, or saying no to something that you usually say yes to. Blocking off just 10 minutes to think about what you really want before you go fix someone else's problem. Small doesn't mean insignificant. Small means doable, repeatable, trust building. And it's in those repeatable moments that change actually happens. So here are 4 ways to take small steps towards meaningful change. Number 1, remember that micro shifts matter. So ask yourself, what would a 5% shift look like? Not 100%, not perfect, just 5% more honest, more clear, more true. And the example of that might be, instead of saying something like, I'm fine, say I'm a little worn out today, but I'm managing. That's a micro shift towards honesty. Number 2, set some realistic goals. This isn't about lowering your standards. It's about aligning with your capacity. So ask yourself, what's actually possible for me this week, given my energy, my life, and the reality happening around me? If your to-do list makes you want to crawl under a blanket, it's not motivating you, it's paralyzing you. And then number 3, be honest about where you are. Skip that fake cheerleading, be real. Instead of forcing optimism, try saying, this is hard, but I can take one step at a time. That one honest move is way, way more powerful than 10 forced ones. And 4, create some accountability that feels safe, not punishment, not perfection tracking, just support. Tell a trusted friend your next small step, or write it down where you're going to see it, or schedule a check-in with someone who gets it. You don't need a 30-day plan. You don't need perfect conditions. You just need one step that says, I'm willing to move a little differently, because meaningful change doesn't come from urgency. It comes from honest momentum. And that starts really small every single time. Let's look at this graphic together, because it says something a lot of us need to hear. We don't move forward by thinking harder. We move forward by being honest with ourselves. So the left side of this chart, that's where many of us live. Overthinking, analysis paralysis, self-doubt disguised as research. We spin out, we plan and tweak and wait for perfect clarity. But the right side, that's the shift we're really craving. That honest reflection. And this graphic shows exactly how we get there. And let's break it down real quick. Embracing tiny steps. You don't need that 90-day action plan. You just need a next step, one that's a little more honest than the last. Example, I'm not ready to have the hard conversation, but I can write the email. Tiny steps build trust with yourself, and they're a little more sustainable than grand gestures. Number 2, remember, shifting that mindset from I already know what I want to it's okay that I'm still figuring out, or from I need to push through this to I want to understand what's real for me first. Mind shifts are quiet, but they can change everything. And 3, Recognizing excuses. Now, this one takes courage because it's asking, is this really my truth? Or is this a protected pattern that I've had possibly all my life? So I don't have time maybe means I'm scared I won't do it well. Or I'm too busy could mean I'm afraid to sit still with myself. So when you recognize the excuse, you can reclaim your power. And 4, understanding personal contracts. We all live by internal rules that we didn't consciously choose, like I always put others first, or if I stop hustling, I'm going to lose my value. Rest is a laziness. These contracts, they feel like the truth, but they're often inherited, outdated, and sometimes unkind. So ask yourself this: what rule am I living by that no longer fits who I am? That's the contract to break. And 5, let's confronting stuckness. Now, this is the moment where you stop pretending that you're not stuck and you just name it. You name it. I've been spinning in this for months and I'm not confused. I'm afraid. And once you name that stuckness without shame, the next honest step starts to appear. So here's the message of this graph. You don't transition from overthinking to clarity by pushing through. You get there by naming the truth, by taking that tiny step, by revising that story, by loosening the grip of old patterns. And all of that, that is personal development. That's self-awareness. It's not performance, not hustle. It's just real. It's slow, sustainable growth. Okay, let's take this from concept to real life. You've just spent time noticing the ways fear, stories, patterns, and hustle show up in your life and how they can stall you. But this only becomes real if you take it home with you. So here's a question I have for you. I want you to sit with this, maybe even write it down or even share in the chat if you feel like it. What is one honest step that you're willing to take? You know, not a perfect step, not a flashy one, just one that feels right for you. You know, maybe it's I'm going to stop saying yes when I mean maybe, or I'm going to ask for help before I spiral into burnout, or I'm going to name that thing that I've been avoiding. There's no pressure to share here at all, but there is power in naming it, even if it's just to yourself. And this is where the shift begins. Sometimes what we need isn't a brand new plan. It's just a small shift in how we show up. This slide gives you a few gentle swaps. These are the things that I've tried, things my clients try, things you can try this week when you catch yourself in a familiar habit. Like when you're spiraling in a decision, don't try to figure it all out. Just ask, what do I already know today? When you're waiting to feel confident, try a move that feels 51% honest, even if it's awkward. When you're avoiding rest because there's too much to do, remind yourself, pause is productive. You don't need to overhaul your whole life. Just pivot slightly, honestly. And the more you do this, the easier it becomes to trust yourself again. Now, sometimes what we need isn't a brand new plan. It's just that small shift, that small shift. Remember that. Remember that. And this slide gives you those swaps. I will provide you with a study sheet later today in our group that will help you to remember these and to use them as a resource. Let me end this by reminding you, you are not behind. You're not too late. You're not broken. You're just standing in a moment. And from this moment here, you get to choose again. You don't need to wait for a better season. You don't need more motivation or a different personality or even a full vision board. You just need one honest next step. This is how real change happens, not from pressure, not from hustle, but from one clear choice repeated with care and consistency. Thank you so much for showing up this morning. Thank you for being brave enough to get honest, even in the quiet ways. I hope something here gave you clarity or comfort or a gentle little nudge. And wherever you go next, go there with your eyes and your mind wide open. To invite you, if it feels good, to respond one way or the other in the chat or in the group discussion. One word that captures what you're leaving with today. And it might be relief or permission, knowledge, a little more clarity, or even whoa. Whatever it is, it's yours. And you can also just sit quietly with your thoughts, reflect, breathe. That was a lot of stuff, a good lot. And I want you to know that you showed up beautifully. I'd love to have some discussion about this. And if you're here live, we can discuss this now. And if you're not, let's discuss it in our group discussion on our school Wild Hearts page. Have a wonderful day, and thanks again for being here.